Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. It's Friday the 2nd of June and my name is Brian Liddy. I'm here with tonight's news for you. And we'll start with Ukraine update day 464. Kyiv's mayor Vitaly Klitschko has ordered shelters to be operational in the capital on a 24-hour basis after allegations that 3 people, including a child, were killed and at least 11 people were injured by falling debris from a Russian missile attack because they were stuck outside a locked air raid shelter. Russia has attacked Kyiv overnight again, with Ukrainian forces claiming air defence shot down all 15 cruise missiles and 21 attack drones. The governor of Dnipropetrovsk region, Serhiy Lysak, said that the city of Nikopol had also been struck by shelling overnight. Vyacheslav Gladkov, the governor of Russia's Belgorod region, said today that 2 people had been killed and 2 others injured when Ukrainian forces shelled a road in the town of Maslova, Pristan, near the Ukrainian border. The governor of Russia's Bryansk region said today that 4 houses were damaged after Ukrainian forces shelled a town near the border. There have also been reports of explosions in occupied Berdyansk in Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia region, one of the areas of the country which the Russian Federation tried to illegally annex. 2 long-range drones attacked fuel and energy infrastructure in Russia's western Smolensk region overnight, but no injuries or fires were reported, according to the region's acting governor. China's Special Envoy for Eurasian Affairs, Li Hui, said today that had said today that the Russian side appreciated China's desire and efforts to resolve the Ukraine crisis. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said on Friday the country was working with Ukraine and other allies to build consensus around the core elements of a just and lasting peace to end the war with Russia. Washington would also encourage initiatives by other countries to bring about an end to the conflict, as long as they uphold the UN Charter and Ukraine's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence. Ukraine has imposed sanctions on Alexander Lebedev, the former KGB intelligence officer whose son Evgeny sits in the House of Lords in connection with Vladimir Putin's invasion. President Zelensky said on Thursday he had received a strong show of support from allies attending a European summit in Moldova. Ukraine's Ministry of Renovation and Infrastructure said on Thursday the UN-brokered Black Sea grain export deal had been halted again by Russia over the transit of Russian ammonia. Our first item this evening is Boris Johnson has bypassed the government's attempt to keep his unredacted WhatsApp messages secret by handing them over directly to the COVID inquiry. In a move that will further frustrate Downing Street, the former Prime Minister circumvented the Cabinet Office, which is seeking to hold up the process by launching legal action. Johnson said he was not willing to let my material become a test case for others, given the government's reservation that handing over Johnson's files could mean serving ministers are forced to oblige also. About 24 notebooks that were also requested by Lady Hallett had been removed by the Cabinet Office, said Johnson, adding that he had asked senior Whitehall officials to pass these to you. If they refused, he said, he would ask for them to be returned so he could again pass them directly to the inquiry. The move will seriously undermine the Cabinet Office's attempt to keep Johnson's unredacted WhatsApps under wraps after it took the unprecedented decision to launch the legal action. A judicial review of Hallett's powers to demand all evidence she deems potentially relevant to the inquiry will now take place, but the legal experts said she was likely to win. The government has faced an uphill task, said Jonathan Jones, a former head of the government's legal department. The likelihood is that the court will say the inquiry chair should be the one to decide how she goes about it and what material she needs to see for that purpose, he said. It is understood that Rishi Sunak and the Deputy Prime Minister, Oliver Dowden, signed off the decision to launch a judicial review. Johnson has said he wants to help the inquiry however possible. Lady Hallett is interested in far more than files. She has also sent Boris Johnson a list of 150 questions, including whether he said he would rather let the bodies pile high than order a second lockdown, or likened COVID to swine flu. Other matters she is investigating include why he missed a number of meetings of the government's Emergency Cobra Task Force, and how meetings with newspaper editors in September 2020 affected the decision to delay imposing a second lockdown. Senior Tories have expressed doubts about the government's decision to take its fight to the courts. George Freeman, the Science Minister, openly said the challenge was unlikely to succeed. The Cabinet Office has argued it wants to comb through all documents requested by the COVID inquiry to remove anything that may have national security implications or that officials deem to be unambiguously irrelevant. However, the legal case has drawn condemnation from opposition parties and upset families of the pandemic's victims. Fiat has called on the government to boost incentives for motorists in the UK to buy electric vehicles, after warning that growth in UK sales of the vehicles has tailed off after a key subsidy was scrapped last year. Writing in an open letter to the government, the car manufacturer said other countries around the world were providing more support for the transition to electric vehicles and argued more action was required in the UK. The intervention comes as governments across advanced economies drive to increase electric vehicle sales and boost manufacturing capacity for new lower carbon models to help meet environmental targets and spur economic growth. Last month, Stellantis, Fiat's parent company, said that it would not be able to keep its commitment to make electric cars in the UK and might have to close factories unless changes were made to post-Brexit trading arrangements with the EU. The company, which also owns the Vauxhall, Citroën and Peugeot marques, told a Commons inquiry into the supply of batteries for electric vehicles that the terms of the government's Brexit deal meant its UK investments hung in the balance. Ford and Jaguar Land Rover also sounded the alarm on the tariffs. The three big global car makers urged the UK government to return to the negotiating table, warning that the transition to electric vehicles would be knocked off course unless the UK and EU delayed stricter rules of origin, which are due to kick in next year, that could add tariffs on car exports. Current post-Brexit rules require 40% of an electric vehicle's parts by value to be sourced in the UK or EU if it is to be sold on the other side of the channel without a 10% trade tariff. This proportion is due to rise to 45% next year, and because most electric vehicle batteries are still imported from Asia and batteries make up a large part of the cost of building a car, vehicles made in the UK and the EU are likely to fall foul of the rules. The EU has suggested the UK should join a pan-European agreement on goods trade, according to the Financial Times. It cited unnamed EU officials who suggested the UK should join the existing pact, involving more than 20 EU, Middle Eastern and North American countries, known as the Pan-Euro-Mediterranean Convention. Commenting, the SNP's international trade spokesperson, Richard Thompson MP, said, "The Westminster establishment parties must rethink their support for the damaging Brexit that is set to impose even further, potentially existential, hardship on the UK's car industry. Brexit has been a disaster for Scotland and the UK, costing us billions, reducing trade, causing staffing shortages across the NHS and businesses, and making us all poorer as living standards plummet." Excuse me. Professor Dame Ellen Closs-Stevens, a politically neutral expert on broadcasting regulation, has been appointed acting chair of the BBC after the Conservative donor Richard Sharp resigned from the position over his failure to declare his role in a loan arrangement to Boris Johnson. Sharp stepped down as chair of the corporation in April after being found to have broken the rules by failing to disclose he played a role helping the Tory Prime Minister secure an £800,000 loan guarantee at the time of his appointment. Today, the Department for Culture, Media and Sport said Stevens would lead the BBC board from the 27th of June for 12 months, or until a new permanent chair has been appointed, whichever was the sooner. Announcing the move, the Culture Secretary, Lucy Fraser, said Stevens has the unanimous support of the BBC board. When she takes over, Dame Ellen will provide stability in the leadership of the BBC, while a process to appoint a new permanent chair is run. The department said any political activity in the past 5 years must be declared for the £160,000 a year role. Stevens has not declared any such activity. Sharp resigned after an investigation by the UK Commissioner of Public Appointments concluded he had broken the rules by failing to declare his link to Johnson's loan guarantee, creating a potential perceived conflict of interest. The row over his role as chair fuelled criticism that the BBC had become too close to the Conservative government and was unable to stand up to meddling from ministers. Sharp came under increased pressure to quit after the corporation apologised for its handling of an impartiality row over Match of the Day presenter Gary Lineker. After tweets critical of the government's language on immigration, Lineker was taken off air. He was reinstated pending a review of social media used by BBC stars amid claims that Sharp's closeness to the government made the corporation's stance on impartiality untenable. After Sharp's resignation, Lineker said the government should never be involved in the appointing of the chair of the BBC. Stevens has been a member of the BBC's governing body since 2010, first serving as a member for Wales on the BBC Trust and then as a Welsh member of the BBC board. She's also a member of the Electoral Commission, a former chair of S4C, the Welsh Fourth Channel, and Emeritus Professor of Communications and Creative Industries at Aberystwyth University. Excuse me. A couple planning to marry soon face being forcibly separated by the Home Office because they are not cohabiting before their wedding. Sarah Bradley, 29, a digital marketing teacher and UK citizen, and Youssef Mikhail, 28, an Egyptian man who graduated from the University of Glasgow with a degree in aeronautical engineering, met in February 2022 through a Christian dating app. Both are practicing Christians and live in Glasgow. Mikhail was planning to formally propose to Bradley this summer, and the couple have discussed the kind of wedding they want. Miss Bradley said, "It was love at first sight, love at first chat, love at first everything when we met in February 2022. Mikhail was diagnosed with Fabry disease in 2020. The rare inherited neurological order means a chemical that is broken down in the body in healthy people builds up and attacks vital organs." Mikhail applied to remain in the UK on humanitarian grounds. His relationship with Ms. Bradley and their plans to marry, as well as a lack of access to treatment in Egypt for his medical condition. But on 16th of May, when he attended a routine appointment at a Home Office reporting centre in Glasgow, he was arrested by officials and taken to Dungavel House, Immigration's removal centre in South Lanarkshire. He was released today, but the threat of being forcibly removed to Egypt remains. His lawyer, Usman Aslam of Mukhtar & Co. Solicitors, has obtained expert medical evidence from doctors in Egypt, saying there is no treatment for this rare condition there. Without treatment, which is available in the UK, Mikhail's lifespan is likely to be shortened. According to evidence from Egyptian doctors, being deprived of treatment for Fabry disease will cause Mikhail intense suffering or death. According to Home Office guidance, people who are not already married or in a civil partnership are expected to have been living together for at least 2 years in a relationship similar to marriage or a civil partnership. Listed exceptions include the couple living apart for work reasons or one partner in the couple is studying abroad. There is no exception for people who are not cohabiting for religious reasons. The Home Office classifies the type of evidence couples can provide as proof that they are in a genuine relationship according to its strength or weakness. Letters of support from friends, relatives, or religious leaders with British citizenship is classed as weak evidence, as are photographs of time spent together by the couple. A blood test for more than 50 forms of cancer could help speed up diagnosis and fast-track patients for treatment, a study suggests. NHS England trial results of the liquid biopsy, published at the world's largest cancer conference in the US, suggest a Gallery blood test has the potential to spot and rule out cancer in people with symptoms. The test detects tiny fragments of tumour DNA in the bloodstream. It alerts doctors as to whether a cancer signal has been detected and predicts where in the body that signal may have originated. Experts welcomed the findings from the trial, but said more research would be needed before the test, made by Californian company Grail, could be rolled out in healthcare systems. The Simplify study, led by the University of Oxford, involved 5,461 people in England and Wales who were referred to their hospital by their GP with suspected cancer. Its results are being presented at the American Society of Clinical Oncology's annual meeting in Chicago. The test correctly revealed 2/3 of cancers among those in the study. In 85% of those positive cases, it was also able to pinpoint the original site of cancer. It was more accurate in older patients than those with more advanced cancers, according to the trial results. Mark Middleton, a professor of experimental cancer medicine at Oxford, who led the trial, said the test had potential for identifying people going to see their GP who are currently not referred urgently to investigate cancer, who do need testing. It was also likely the test could speed up diagnosis, but it is not certain which rapid diagnostic pathway is the right one, Middleton said. The first use case above has the potential to diagnose cancers earlier, or second and third have the potential to help achieve cancer targets and therefore reduce waiting for patients by reducing the overall number of tests needed to diagnose the cancers. Dr. David Crosby, the head of Prevention and Early Detection Cancer at Cancer Research UK, said, "The findings from the study suggest this test could be used to support GPs to make clinical assessments, but much more research is needed in a larger trial to see if it could improve GP assessment and ultimately patient outcomes." NHS England has also been using the Gallery test in thousands of people without symptoms to see if it can detect hidden cancers. Results are expected later this year. If successful, it plans to roll the test out to about 1 million people. The bipartisan bill to solve the US debt ceiling crisis just days before a catastrophic and unprecedented default was on its way to President Biden's desk today, as the US president prepared to address the nation and hailed a big win for our economy and the American people. The compromise package, negotiated between Biden and the House Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, passed the US Senate late on Thursday. President Biden acknowledged that it leaves neither Republicans nor Democrats fully pleased with the outcome. But the result, after weeks of tortuous negotiations, suspends the debt ceiling issue until 2025 after the next presidential election. The final Senate vote capped off a long day as lawmakers spent hours considering amendments to the legislation. All 11 of the proposed amendments failed to gain enough support to be added to the underlying bill. Several of the amendments had been introduced by Senate Republicans who wanted larger cuts in government spending. Today's vote is a good outcome because Democrats did a very good job taking the worst parts of the Republican plan off the table, the Senate Majority Leader Democrat Chuck Schumer said after the vote. The Senate Minority Leader Republican Mitch McConnell supported the bill but called for further action to reduce the federal government's debt of more than $31 trillion. More than £15 million has been awarded to a range of projects supporting people affected by substance use. These include residential rehabilitation services, support for those affected by addiction and homelessness, and programmes working with children and families affected by a loved one's substance use. The number of lives lost to drugs is still too high in Scotland, and these funds are vital for those services working on the front line to help those affected and their families. Simon Community Scotland is one of the latest recipients, receiving £408,000 to deliver a new Edinburgh-based project, We See You, offering people who are homeless and using substances a safe space and access to a range of support services. Drugs and Alcohol Policy Minister Helena Whittam said, "The National Mission funds have now supported 300 projects, but we know there is much work still to do. These organisations save lives and we want to support them so that they can extend as far into their communities as possible and offer people the support they need when and where they need it." Through our £250 million National Drugs Mission, we are focused on supporting everyone affected by problem substance use, delivering real change on the ground and implementing evidence-based approaches to improve and save lives. The Scottish Government's public consultation, Land Reform in a Net Zero Nation, was open from the 4th of July until the 30th of October 2022. The consultation paper set out a number of proposals for inclusion in the Land Reform Bill and also invited respondents to give their views on the other ideas and proposals which may or may not be included in the bill. It received 537 responses, 162 from groups or organisations and 375 from individual members of the public. 5 in-person consultation events were also held across Scotland, with a further event online. Commenting on the consultation, Cabinet Secretary for Rural Affairs, Land Reform and Islands, Mary Goujian, said, "We already have a strong record of progressive and innovative land reform in our country, and indeed there are many innovative landowners across the country who are rising to the changing social, environmental and economic issues we face as a society. However, we can go further. In government, we must do more to strengthen the contribution that large-scale land holdings make to the public interest, improve transparency of land ownership and empower local communities." She went on to say, "The respondents to this consultation agree with that view, and a majority agree with many of our ambitious proposals for land reform, including the introduction of a public interest test for transfers of large-scale land holdings. I want to thank all the individuals and organisations who took the time to share their views and valuable insights. This is not the end of the discussion. I want to speak directly to stakeholders to hear their feedback and understand any concerns they might have." Third sector organisations are to be paid a fee for helping provide supporting information for people applying for child disability payment or adult disability payment. The £33.50 fee will be paid when they are asked by Social Security Scotland to complete a supporting information request form. People who are applying for disability benefits who find it difficult or face barriers gathering supporting information themselves will be able to name organisations or to provide this for them. These can include third sector organisations that are helping them in their day-to-day lives, such as those offering social care or support during an illness. Collecting supporting information on behalf of people is a key difference in how people are encouraged and supported to apply for Scottish Government disability benefits. Supporting information request forms are completed to help understand how a person's health condition or disability affects their lives and what support they need. As well as information from health and social care professionals, information could also come from charities and third sector organisations who support disabled people. The process of requesting and giving equal consideration to supporting information from third sector organisations is not offered by the Department for Work and Pensions in England and Wales, and is an example of how Social Security Scotland is doing things differently to better support people applying for benefits. If disabled people need additional help to apply for Scottish Government benefits, the free and independent advocacy service provided by Voiceability helps people throughout the whole of the process, from the point of application through to any request for redetermination and appeal. Cabinet Secretary for Social Justice Shirley Ann Somerville said, "We know that third sector organisations supporting disabled people are often best placed to provide information on their conditions and needs, which is why we are introducing this payment. We recognise the value of the information that organisations supporting disabled people can supply, and we want to put it on an equal footing with the information from other professionals, such as social care staff or GPs." And then our final item tonight, the Declaration of Arbroath goes on display at the National Museum of Scotland tomorrow for the first time in 18 years. The display has been organised in partnership between National Museums Scotland and National Records of Scotland, who are the custodians of the Declaration. The famous document will be on show from 3rd of June to the 2nd of July 2023. The Declaration of Arbroath was last displayed 18 years ago at the Scottish Parliament. The iconic and fragile 700-year-old document, which is cared for and preserved for future generations by National Records of Scotland, can only be displayed occasionally in order to ensure its long-term preservation. The Declaration was due to be displayed in April 2020 to coincide with its 700th anniversary, but this was postponed due to the pandemic. The new summer date has been chosen to give as many people as possible the rare chance to see one of Scotland's most important historic documents. The Declaration of Arbroath is a letter dated the 6th of April 1320, written by the barons and freeholders of Scotland on behalf of the King of Scotland to Pope John Paul XII, Pope John Paul XXII, asking him to recognise Scotland's independence and acknowledge Robert the Bruce as the country's lawful king. The letter also asks the pontiff to persuade King Edward II of England to end hostilities against the Scots, so that their energy may be better used to secure the frontiers of Christendom. The declaration was probably drafted at a meeting of the king and his council at Newbattle, then written up in the scriptorium of Arbroath Abbey. Written in Latin, it was sealed by 8 earls and about 40 barons. It was authenticated by seals as documents at that time were not signed. Only 19 seals now remain. Scottish Government Culture Minister Christina McKelvey said, "The Declaration of Arbroath is of great historic and cultural interest to people living in Scotland, as well as the sizable Scottish diaspora around the world. I hope people from across the country and further afield will take this rare opportunity to visit our wonderful National Museum to view this iconic document which has played such an important part in the history of our country." Well, that's it for this evening, but before I go, I just want to remind you that here at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. So to everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, we thank you very much. You know that our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please do consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. We have set ourselves a target of adding 10,000 new subscribers to enable us to employ staff to make more programmes. So all it leaves now is for me to say good night, thank you for watching, and please join us on Sunday for your Full Scottish, which will be hosted by Andrew Wilson. Thank you and good night.